Well, hello! You know, whatever fault I may have, being inconsistent isn't one of them. You know, I did a live stream last night that lasted nearly 3.5 hours. I could actually talk all night. I don't think people want me to talk all night, but, you know, I love talking and listening to you all. Yeah, it was like 3.5 hours. I lose track of time when I'm talking to people. I don't know why people find it so amazing that I could read like an endless string of questions that are scrolling past and able to hit most of them unless it's, you know, like a completely redundant question. To me that's normal. I could actually operate almost 2 or 3 times that fast. However, talking that fast is slightly difficult when it comes to answering questions. Today things evened out. I was looking forward to being up about $400 on my income from, I have 2 rental properties. I was like, oh great, I've already paid off all my property taxes, which were just over $4,300. I was like, oh great, I'm going to have $400 to buy some necessities. So I was expecting the check in the mail, and I got it. It's a $400 check from, but right along with that $400 check was a $480 bill for my car insurance. So I got $400, but I basically had to pay out $500. That's kind of how things work for me. It's not funny, actually. I don't know why I'm laughing, honestly. One thing that actually intrigued people last night a lot, and I realized that even though I'd made videos about disembodied beings before and talked about talismans and talking boards and, you know, the dangers thereof, I'd not actually spoken about what drives these beings to disembodied beings, the bad ones, and most of them are, because if they're temporalized, by definition, they're kind of like a rotten piece of fruit. A rotten piece of fruit is not evil, it's just, you know, it's just spoiled and it's undesirable, and you know, it's to be rejected for many reasons. Kind of a crude analogy, but it's pretty accurate. By the way, I think, you know, as pithy as Plotinus is, and there's nothing, really there's nothing out there that's more pithy than Plotinus, except for the guy that wrote Tesla's favorite work. That would be Theoria Philosophiae Naturalis, be Roger Boscovich. People can't even read a page of that. I think Plotinus would actually be quite proud of me for, you know, amazing discoveries and distilling everything down so simply. And, you know, it's a good characteristic to have. I'm glad I'm able to figure out a lot of this stuff. This gets into that. It's kind of a crude analogy. Even in wintertime, I sleep with the fan on me. All the time, all night long. It's something that I've grown accustomed to. It's not that I can't sleep without a fan on me, but I always have a fan on. The winds of life force from spiritual turmoil is actually what drives these beings. Have you ever wondered, and no one's answered this question before, not in video or article, because, well, they feed off the energy. It's like, well, that's extremely crude, and that doesn't explain anything. What are these beings, you know, places that are haunted? Poltergeists and hauntings are the same thing. They have different characteristics, but they have the same subject principle that's driving them. You know, why are they interested in agitation? Why are they drawn to people that are very mentally agitated, you know, perpetually disturbed, kind of like a, you know, a moth to one of those UV lights? Why do they enjoy you being frightened and scared and especially angry and upset? The list goes on and on. It's kind of like me with the fan on. You know, you get used to it. It's these beings, not that they actually breathe, since they're not alive, obviously so. They are sentient, but they're not alive. It's like catching a breath from the suffocation that is the temporalized, disembodied state that they're actually in. They're not actually as is commonly said by a lot of these people that are not that intelligent, they're feeding off your energy. They're not feeding off of anybody's energy, rather the energy generated from same. It would be as if another being were fed off of the disturbance of somebody flapping their arms in the water, the pool water. You know, they get a kick from it, kind of like I did when I was younger, and in the pool, you know, they actually had a wave pool. It was this machine that actually moved paddles back and forth, and they generated waves. I think they phased those out because they were kind of dangerous, and, you know, some people, you know, got drowned by the wave action if the lifeguards weren't watching. But anyway, they generated waves, and everybody enjoyed it. We actually had a thing like that here in this town. It was a wave generating machine, and I still think they have those in places. But they, you know, it's kind of like me at night with the fan on. You know, the waves of energy, of course it's not energy, it's the air blowing across my face. You know, I've been that way for decades now. They get the exact same, it's like, why are they driven from the fear, the anger, the agitation, the mental agitation? Why is it that an extremely high percentage of beings that are possessed, I mean living beings that are possessed, are those that are extremely disturbed? I mean, they're like a perpetual ball of agitation. Calm, restful, peaceful people, like me, for example. Whether you agree with that or not, I mean, it's the case. I am, you know, not driven by emotions at all. I mean, I enjoy, sorry, I got the hiccups there. I'm not going to eat cantaloupe right before a video, excuse me. But this is why they do it. They are fed by that energy, not by your energy, but by the energy generated from the fear, the anger, the agitation. These beings are best like young people. There's an old saying that said young people are best seen but not heard from. I've been in live streams where people have heard things moving here in my place. And if you know what they are, I mean, you fear things that you don't understand or don't comprehend. I can't see anything, but stuff's moving. And to feed into that energy, you know, it's kind of like giving attention to a spoiled little brat, for example. Ooh, I got some attention by, you know, knocking the vase off. I'll do something bigger next time, or I'll do the same thing again. It feeds into that, and they're not actually growing or gaining power from that. They're not anything extra outside or in addition to what they are. It's not like you're feeding them energy in so far as charging up a battery and making it more powerful. You're actually giving them the very air, not literally air, giving them the very air that makes them feel alive, even though, of course, they are not alive. This is the reason why they do it. It's both rational and is logical, and it is the impetus behind the reason why they do these things. Socrates in Phaedo 83d said, because every pleasure or pain has with it a sort of rivet by which it fastens the soul to the body and pins it down and makes it corporeal, is an extremely accurate philosophical statement. A lingering, temporalized, disembodied being is corporeal insofar as, even though it's not corporeal anymore, insofar as animating a corporeal body, but it is riveted to this world. This is the reason why anything that can be contacted is not something that you want to contact. If you think about that for 5 seconds, you'll understand what that means. It's not complicated at all. If you can contact it, you don't want to contact it. If it is temporalized and it is in disembodied state, you don't want to contact it. You're not contacting Grandma or, your Uncle Larry that passed away last year. You're not doing that. Anything can and will, this is one thing the Catholics and the exorcists have right. You don't want to even think about doing that. It's a horrible idea. They will pretend that they are Bob, Sue, or Larry, the person that you're intending to contact, just so they could feed off your disturbance through the contact and the agitation and the energy that you're feeding them. Not from yourself, but from the agitation thereof. You don't want to even think about contacting disembodied temporalized beings. It's like looking for a good person down on death row. There might be one out of the 10,000 that are there, but you don't want to try it. There really are no good people down there. Nearly a perfect analogy. These cold spots, too, that people talk about, I'm actually going down a short laundry list of things that people encounter in phenomena of disembodied beings, and they have it completely backwards. I just explained why these beings love to induce fear and agitation, etc., into you. They're not feeding off of you. They essentially are, but they're feeding off the disturbance that you're creating. These cold spots, they're actually, and I was in a house of a possessed young person, and he ended up succumbing to that possession, and he was young, and he wasn't on anything, and he was healthy. I think he was like 24 years old. There was a cold sphere around the guy, even though his house was a normal temperature. I mean, it's just freezing, freezing cold. This is the cold cathode effect. When the anode heats, the cathode chills. I don't want to go into explaining this. I've done it before, and if you type in cold cathode effect on a Google search, you'll get a zillion results, and you could read all about the cold cathode effect. This is also, too, the effect of attempted materialization of these disembodied beings and how they try to reach across the realm or the divide between their existence, which is not existential existence, and our existence, which is corporeal and consubstantial existence, kind of like the animated radio. They themselves are in the realm of the signal, and we, of course, are in the realm of the animated radio, which is, of course, the union between the radio and the signal. You know, that's a temporal, has a beginning in time, has an end in time. They're trying to reach and cross the divide of that. It's very, very simple. They're not drawing energy out of the environment, which a lot of people have said is completely ridiculous. It's just the simplex cold cathode effect. It certainly follows that without question that these ignorant deceased, in many countless instances, suffer to interact with the living like a lonely, and in this case, of course, in many cases, literally an invisible young person is kept at length from interacting with others. Suffering all the while, to the extension that, of course, we know these extremely ignorant, disembodied beings are synonymous in many cases with evil, and therefore, as such, the will of their sentience is, we could say, bestial. These investigators of same are instigators who quite literally feed the beast, as it were. They love talking to them. They love feeding it, kind of like giving, you know, an ignorant, spiteful entity the very thing that it craves after, which is attention. They extensively and repeatedly, as anybody has seen, make contact with and coax on and ask questions of these beings. And when they get scared, and the beings actually can feed off of that energy that's generated from the disturbance of the agitation and the fear and the anxiety and all the rest of it. You know, it's kind of like the fisherman. He's got a box, and I used to fish ages ago. He's got a box full of lures, and, you know, you might be in a new spot and a different type of fish. It's like, you know, you're in there, well, that lure doesn't work. And you use a different one. You keep using them until you find something that works. And when you know it works, you stick with it. Well, these disembodied beings, when they induce that energy to their benefit, I mean, they're no different than the fishermen that will stick with that lure. And they'll amplify same. And this is how people get into, you know, a dark spiral of these haunted houses. It might start out not innocently, but start out innocently enough. But people feed into it. You know, they're feeding the creature chained in the basement, not literally, and feeding it, and to their detriment. You know, they're feeding it, and the creature will do whatever it feels is necessary to keep being fed. Well, last time I got a reaction and got fed by doing this. I'm going to continue to do that. All sentient beings on this universe, whether they be embodied or disembodied, operate off the same impulse principles: fears, desires, anxieties, attachments. There is no difference between embodiment and disembodiment as so far as the impulses that feed any type of sentient being, whether it be embodied or disembodied. There's absolutely no distinction. Best course, and logically and wisely so, is to let the spirit rest. Don't conjure it, don't talk to it. You know, this is a prolonging of hell for that being. If you want what's best for these beings, this is what you do. You know, saying, as they do in Hollywood shows, and when they say, find rest, or they bring in an exorcist, or they burn, they smudge sage and stuff. I mean, this is just Hollywood garbage, and this is stuff that you see these investigators do. It doesn't effectuate anything. It doesn't clean anything. You know, this house is clean, you know, like the Hollywood movie. That stuff doesn't work. It's been proven time and time again that it doesn't work. It might give someone a temporary, you know, sense that things have been fixed, but you haven't fixed anything. That's like taking your depressed buddy and, you know, patting him on the back. So it'll be better tomorrow. You know, you've done nothing to help that person. You probably ticked them off. It'll be better. Don't worry. You know, I have hope for you. All it ever ends up doing is ticking people off, and it does the same thing to sense. You know, be at rest. Go to the light. Go to the light, Carol Ann. Remember that movie? First person on Earth, and I'm proud of this. And there are people that have tested this out that live in genuinely haunted houses, and it's called a spark gap generator. You can get the lower end models off of Amazon and eBay. I'm not selling anything, okay? It's called a spark gap generator. What it operates off of is a broad spectrum destructive interference. It's a broad spectrum EMR, electromagnetic radiation, destructive interference device. I mean, it just sends out massive pulses across a broad spectrum of frequencies. Spark gap generator. The best type would be a rotary spark gap that actually makes countless contacts in a rotary turn. You could actually find videos on rotary spark gap generators. I don't think anybody builds them for sale. Somebody could make them if they had even meager skills. The problems are that it's bad for your health. It creates ozone. They're self-destructive devices. They're not good for your spirit. They're not good for anybody. They're especially really, really bad for your pets, who are way more sensitive to EMF fields than human beings are. But they work as actually disruptive devices against disembodied beings. I've literally had, including a famous person. She lives in a very famous Hollywood place. She's a famous Hollywood actress. I'm not going to tell you her name. She got one off my advice. There's one section of her super enormous house. It's super enormous. I think probably her living room's bigger than my whole house is. And it's like, yeah, it works. I didn't think it would. She left it turned on all the time, however, and it burns itself out. You're not supposed to leave them turned on all the time because they're very, very self-destructive devices. But anyway, if you ever need to get rid of one, a spark gap generator, fix it. The reason why spirits register on a tri-field meter is due to dielectric breakdown. You could look up dielectric breakdown. I'm not going to get into explaining elaborate electrical theory here in this video, and I don't think anybody wants to hear it. It's just a fancy way of saying energy discharge. But these disembodied beings actually register on a tri-field meter because of the dielectric breakdown that actually occurs. All of this, of course, in the whole of things is extremely reducible to spiritual modulation. Absolutely everything in metaphysics and everything in transcendence, and the inverse of transcendence, which is embodiment, and in the pinnacle of embodiment, which would be literally hell, is about spiritual modulation. Bhav Nirodha Nabandham, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. The Platonists, the Neoplatonists, the Egyptians, Advaita Vedanta, original Buddhists, all of them refer to exactly one and the same thing, spiritual modulation. It has everything to do with, and the elimination thereof. I mean, transcendence and wisdom itself, of course, is self-proximity, which is no different than saying spiritual demodulation, i.e. theurgy. Also, too, called sati, samadhi, mineme, apophatism, the method of via negativa. All of these things refer to one and the same thing. All of this is really, really, really simple. By the way, hospitals contain, like, especially these retired hospitals, you can't really investigate a a working hospital for obvious reasons, but these retired hospitals contain a super ton of ether whirlpools due to, obviously so, you don't have to think about it for less than 5 seconds to figure it out, due to the emotional wake fronts that actually occur in hospitals, especially the emergency wards. You're basically looking at a building designed to house and the epicenters for emotional tornadoes of, happening probably on an hourly basis, 24 hours a day for God knows how many years that the hospital is open. It's the reason why all these people love to investigate these hospitals, because they're just a hotbed of ether whirlpools of emotional disturbance. And these are the same whirlpools that these beings feed off of from living beings. They're not literally feeding off of your energy, not that they actually can't drain you. They certainly can, but what they actually feed off of is the disturbances that you create, that is literally the very air that they breathe, not that they are literally breathing. It is a type of air. It's like, feeding an animal in a cage that hasn't been fed in a while. It's like, ooh, if I do this, I'm going to get fed. When I get fed, I feel a lot better, and this makes me happy. Not that happiness is the correct word for it. By the way, you need to avoid things like talismans and conjuring boards that are actually, of course, designed to focus the will, your will, like a lighthouse. Like bugs to a porch light, or those little bug zapper UV lights that the bugs go towards, or even just a night light at night. That the moths and the mosquitoes and everything fly towards. What these things do, I love it when the nihilist slash atheist slash atomist says, Ouija boards don't work, it's just a piece of plastic and cardboard. It's like it's exactly what they are. But that's not why they work. They work because they are focusing devices meant to focus your will, and they're talismans. Focus your will like a lighthouse. There ain't no bugs buzzing around my back porch until I flick that back porch light on, and in just a few seconds, you got all these mosquitoes and moths and everything are buzzing around the light. When you actually use these talismans as focusing device, you make your will like a lighthouse, and they send a beacon to the other side. There's really only two types of existence. There's magnitude and anti-magnitude. There's spatial and counterspatial. There's not multiple dimensions in Mother Nature's universe. There's dimensionality and anti-dimensionality. And anti-dimensionality includes this limbo realm, or a substrate between existential existence. The signal, if it were sentient, which of course is not sentient, is everywhere and nowhere. It doesn't matter if I smash this radio, you still have the signal, right? It's like, if I turn the radio off, what if somebody stupidly said that the signal doesn't exist if I turn off the radio or if I smash the radio? You're like, well, that's stupid. You've done nothing to the signal by turning the radio off or smashing it. You know that, but people will say something is stupid. It's like, whoa, there's no soul. It's once the body's gone, that's it. It's like, well, that's extremely stupid. That's extremely myopic, but that's getting into discussing atomism, so I'm not interested in discussing that here. Hell, if you want a perfect analogy, and I love keeping things simple, hell is like a skipping record of desire and misery and attachments. It just keeps skipping over and over and over again. Eventually it will exhaust itself. But when you feed into these entities, all you're doing is like winding up that old record player, because they had a little internal mechanism, like a wind-up watch that had an internal spring instead of a battery. You're just winding it up more. You're supposed to let these beings be at rest as fast and expedient as possible. By winding them up, you're doing a disservice both to yourself and especially to these beings. You're giving them attention, you're feeding them, and you're winding the watch of their attachments. And that's not good for anybody. Nobody talks about this except for me. I've never seen an article about it or a video about it, and I know it doesn't exist. So hell is a skipping record of desires and attachments and fears. These are the slings and arrows, of course, which bind the sentient being to this world after displacement from the body. Advanced consciousness, as far as differentiating out the human soul from the animal soul. Advanced consciousnesses, of course, identify with and as the body, whereas they're very intelligent animals, but most animals do not identify, nor do they look into mirrors, identify with or as the body. So this self-projective, multiplicative of ignorance, however, avidya and agnosis don't mean ignorance, is the reason why advanced consciousnesses such as those found in human beings are so apt and prone to this state of existence after separation from the body. So it's a great boon and a great opportunity, but most people don't take advantage, of course, of that opportunity, unfortunately. One doesn't return to as or with the one. One cannot ascend to that which one is by definition. Gold is gold is gold, obviously. So there's like maybe $400 or $500. Gold is nearly gold is nearly $4,000 an ounce, by the way, tonight. There's like $400 or $500 worth of gold in this. I mean, gold is always gold, but we're talking about extraction from the matrix that it's actually in. Rather, removal of the attribute, of the turning a spiral into a circle. You know, a spiral is an endless going outwards from a source. If I were actually just to remove the primordial attribute of the spiral, this would actually become a circle. However, three-dimensionally we're talking about a sphere. This is perfection, this is transcendence, the removal of that thing that is always sending the soul outwards more and more and more and more. Wisdom, by definition, of course, is self-proximity. The soul, of course, and this is more difficult to explain, is a dendritic ether formation. It is sentient and self-replicating, and it is also, too, self-feeding, unlike fields, since all fields, as I've accurately said, thankfully the first person on earth to tell you what a field is in very, very simplex terms, an ether perturbation modality, which is what a field is. However, explaining what the soul is as an ether modality, but not an ether perturbation modality, is slightly more difficult, but not really. It's a self-feeding and self-replicating dendritic ether formation. But to say formation is inaccurate. However, the logic and metaphysics of disembodied beings and the reason why they're attached and the reason why they love agitating and disturbing people is hyper-rational, it's hyper-simple, and it's hyper-logical, as it must necessitatively be so. This is true metaphysics. This is true apophatic metaphysics, heralded by Plato, Pythagoras, Aristotle, Proclus, Plotinus, Numenius. This is very, very simple. Everything fits together very simple in the picture of the ether and of natura naturans, or conventionally natural order. This is the reason why you should avoid doing things. A lot of people, however, love the excitement of doing it. It's like, let's see what happens. They get bored, like they got nothing better to do with their life. And, you know, let's open up a portal. Let's make my will like a lighthouse that peers into the other side and shines a light into the realm of beings that I don't want to contact. That's like, I'm going to go down to death row. I'm going to make some pen pals with all the great folks down there. It's like, death row? Yeah. Where are you going down there? Well, I'm sure there's some good people down there. I was like, not really, no. People do this. That's how that one young person that I met with, my rich old friend, was. He got bored one day and he started messing around with things he shouldn't have messed around with, and he had a possession. Got attached to him, kind of like getting a leech on you. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you like these videos. I tried to keep them short and simple. If you ever want to contact me, my email's in the description of this video below. Any donation is always warmly welcome. I hope you have a lovely rest of your week. Lux e veritas. I gotta stop eating cantaloupe late at night. I get weak-willed at night. I want some cantaloupe. I gotta stop that. Oh my goodness.